Chapter 10, the endocrine system. The endocrine system communicates sending chemical messages called hormones. Hormones influence growth, they influence development, behavior, and metabolism. The main function of the endocrine system is to coordinate the body systems and to help maintain homeostasis. The endocrine system works with the nervous system, but it's a more leisurely system of communication than the nervous system. Endocrine glands contain cells called secretory cells that release their products, called hormones, into the extracellular fluid where they diffuse into the bloodstream. Therefore, they're means of more leisurely acting than communication with that of the nervous system. Hormones are one type of chemical messenger found in the human body. This image shows the hormone diffuses from the secretory cell contained within these either endocrine glands or other organs of the body that have endocrine functioning. The hormone's going to diffuse from that fluid, extracellular fluid, into the bloodstream where it's going to travel throughout the body to target cells. The major endocrine glands are the pituitary, the thyroid, parathyroid, adrenals, and pineal glands. Organs with some endocrine tissue include the hypothalamus, the thymus, pancreas, ovaries, testes, heart, placenta, stomach, intestines, and kidneys. Some of these organs we will be studying their hormones within Chapter 10. Some of the other organs, such as the kidneys, heart, we will study in future chapters. And so this is just the layout of the organs and the endocrine glands within the body and the different hormones that they secrete. We will cover some of these more in depth as we progress through the chapter. Hormones travel in the bloodstream, as previously noted, and although they come into contact with virtually all cells because they are contained in the blood, they typically affect a particular type of cell, and this type of cell is called a target cell. In other words, cells that are designed to respond to antidiuretic hormone will only respond to that antidiuretic hormone. Every cell in the body will not. Target cells have specific receptors. In the previous example, if they'll respond to antidiuretic hormone, then they have an antidiuretic hormone receptor. The target cells, as noted, have these receptors. These are just going to be protein molecules. It's going to be located on the plasma membrane and going to bind and recognize that specific hormone. Receptors, these target receptors, are often lacking in cancerous cells, thus resulting in a failure of a response to that particular hormone. Other cells in the body, other than the target cells, lack the correct receptors and are unaffected by a particular hormone if they do not have the specific receptor for that. The mechanism by which a hormone influences target cell depends on the chemical makeup of the hormone, and there are two main types: lipid-soluble and water-soluble. Lipid-soluble hormones include the steroid hormones derived from cholesterol. And the main organs and glands that secrete steroid hormones are the ovaries, the testes, and the adrenal glands. These lipid-soluble hormones move easily through the cell's plasma membrane because, recall, it is a phospholipid bilayer itself. Lipid-soluble hormones, once inside the target cell, the steroid hormone combines with a receptor molecule. In the nucleus, the hormone receptor complex attaches to the DNA and can activate certain genes to synthesize specific proteins. This activation leads the target cell to synthesize proteins, including enzymes, that may stimulate or inhibit a particular metabolic pathway. This shows the imagery of a steroid hormone derived from cholesterol. So in step 1, the steroid hormone diffuses through the plasma membrane of the target cell. Once inside the cell, it will bind to a receptor located in the cytoplasm of that target cell, be transported into the nucleus, binds to the DNA in step 4, and activates certain genes. Once the DNA is transcribed to messenger RNA, it's transported back out to the cytoplasm, to the ribosome, where proteins, including enzymes, which is just proteins, synthesized, and the enzymes alter the activity of the cell. Water-soluble hormones, on the other hand, are made of amino acids, and they cannot pass through the lipid bilayer of the plasma membrane and require a second messenger to exert their effects. Water-soluble hormones are considered first messengers. They exert their effects indirectly by binding to receptors on the surface of the plasma membrane. This stimulates second messengers within the cell to carry out the effect of that particular hormone. So a water-soluble is made of amino acid, considered a first messenger. It's going to bind to a receptor on the cell membrane, which is going to activate a second messenger within the cell. A common second messenger is cyclic adenosine monophosphate, or otherwise known as CAMP. Hormones bind to the receptor site on the target cell membrane, prompting the conversion of ATP to CAMP within the cell. CAMP activates an enzyme within the cell called the protein kinase, which in turn activates another enzyme, and so on. The end result of the enzyme cascade is the activation of an enzyme, in this case, that catalyzes the breakdown of glycogen to glucose within the liver or skeleton muscles. Again, this is the example of a water-soluble hormone. So it's considered a first messenger, so it's going to bind on the cell surface. It will not diffuse directly through. In this example, it's going to bind. It's going to the binding activates the enzyme responsible for producing CAMP, considered a second messenger from ATP. CAMP is going to initiate an enzyme cascade. This one's going to break down glycogen to glucose within the cytoplasm. You notice it never goes within the nucleus itself. This is all occurring within the cytoplasm. Summary of the lipid soluble versus water soluble. Lipid soluble moves into a cell and can stimulate the synthesis of proteins, whereas water soluble proteins activate proteins already present within the cell. And they do this without ever entering the cell. They'll bind on the cell surface. Some research now indicates that steroid hormones may have additional mechanisms of action, including interacting with certain membrane receptors. Negative feedback mechanism is the most common. Negative feedback mechanism is the major mechanism of the body to maintain homeostasis. And homeostasis just keeps the body's internal environment relatively constant, such as our set point for temperature, 98.6, our levels of glucose, our levels of calcium. Increased blood level of a specific hormone inhibits its further release. Some endocrine glands are sensitive to a particular condition they regulate rather than to the level of hormone they produce. For example, the pancreas stops secreting insulin when levels of blood glucose begin to decline. Positive feedback mechanism, on the other hand, there are some processes within the body that go through positive feedback mechanism. In a positive feedback mechanism, the outcome of a process further stimulates the process. Primary example of this is the hormone oxytocin and uterine contractions of childbirth. It also includes milk ejection. Oxytocin will also stimulate milk ejection in nursing mothers. So in this example, during childbirth, the pituitary glands release a specific hormone called oxytocin, which stimulates the uterus to contract. Uterine contractions stimulate the release of more oxytocin, stimulating more contractions, till eventually expulsion of the baby and the placenta terminate this feedback. So it's increasing in intensity. Interactions between hormones can be antagonistic, synergistic, or permissive. Antagonistic is when the effect of one hormone opposes that of another, such as glucagon and insulin. Glucagon is going to increase blood glucose, whereas insulin is going to decrease blood glucose. Synergistic is the response of a tissue to a combination of hormones. It's much greater than its response to either individual hormone, such as epinephrine from the adrenal glands and glucagon from the pancreas prompt the liver to release glucose. Permissive is when one hormone must be present for another hormone to exert its effect, such as thyroid hormone must be present for the hormone aldosterone produced by the adrenal glands to stimulate reabsorption of sodium within the kidneys.